Hi everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going on a pretty amazing journey. We're going to start right at the roots of grassroots empowerment and work our way all the way up to macro-level governance in India. Grab a notebook because we're diving into some seriously eye-opening data to decode the massive transitions shaping the nation right now. Okay, let's just quickly look at our roadmap for today. We'll be looking at the cooperative growth model, tackling India's energy security challenge, exploring how women's income boosts health, checking out some positive trends in education, and finally digging into measuring service sector growth.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the cooperative growth model and grassroots empowerment.
So imagine you're a small farmer, right? You need capital to cultivate your wheat or rice. Well, the Primary Agriculture Credit Society, or PACS, is essentially your village-level bank. It acts as the ultimate ground-level enabler. It directly provides financial services, fertilizers, and equipment, and totally bypasses the exploitation you'd usually face from middlemen. And you really don't have to look far to see this working perfectly. Take Amul, for instance. It's not just a brand, it is literally a movement. When a dairy farmer sells their milk through this cooperative, they actually get a fair price and a direct share of the profits. It's a brilliant model that democratizes wealth, proving that when a community pools its resources, they can outperform traditional corporate structures while lifting millions out of poverty in the process. But look, it's not all perfect. We've got to acknowledge the real hurdles here, things like political interference or just a lack of professional management. Overcoming these issues requires a massive push toward transparency, and that's exactly why the government's Ministry of Cooperation is stepping in with a huge digitization drive. They're mandating digital records and aiming to connect these grassroots farmers directly to modern e-commerce platforms like Amazon and Flipkart. It's all about cutting out corruption and bringing these century-old structures into the modern digital economy. Moving right along to Section 2, let's look at India's energy security challenge and what it takes to fuel the nation. 90%. Just let that sink in for a second. 90% of India's crude oil is imported. That's a massive jump from around 55% back in the late 90s, and it heavily exposes the nation to crises in West Asia. Think about it. 9 out of every 10 drops of oil fueling the country's transport and industry come from outside its borders. When geopolitical tensions flare up, global oil prices skyrocket, and that directly hits the everyday citizen through inflation and higher costs for basic goods. So, how on earth do you solve a vulnerability that massive? Well, the strategy is multi-pronged. India is actively building strategic petroleum reserves, which are essentially giant underground oil storage tanks in places like Mangaluru, Visakhapatnam, Padur, and Chandakol. Add to that an aggressive push to diversify import sources, basically buying from anyone willing to sell at a fair price, and a renewed drive for domestic oil exploration. And here's a super practical policy solution that I find really fascinating. Instead of just waiting for everyone to afford a brand new, expensive electric car, we can retrofit. By safely converting the existing 300 million internal combustion engines into EVs using electric battery packs, we create an amazing circular economy. It drastically reduces oil dependency, it cuts emissions, and most importantly, it's actually affordable for a middle-class family.
All right, Section 3. This is all about economic empowerment and how women's income actually boosts health.
We are actually right in the middle of two massive simultaneous shifts right now. On one hand, there's an economic transition, with more and more women joining the formal workforce. On the other hand, there's an epidemiological transition. The nation is moving away from infectious diseases and is now battling lifestyle diseases like diabetes and heart conditions. And these fundamentally require preventive care, better diets, and healthier living environments.
And here is where it gets really interesting. Recent Provident Fund data actually proves that when women take the lead on household finances, overall medical expenses go down. Why? Because they proactively invest in better nutrition and preventive family care. Studies backed by brilliant minds like Nobel laureates Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo show a direct correlation here. Higher female income doesn't just mean more luxury spending, it means higher quality food, better sanitation, and regular fitness for the kids. By economically empowering women, the nation is inadvertently solving massive public health challenges.
Let's pivot a bit for Section 4, positive trends in education, specifically looking at school infrastructure. 7%. According to the latest UDC Plus report, that's the government's massive unified database for education using the 2025-26 data. The secondary school dropout rate has impressively fallen to just 7%, down from 8.2%. Now,
A drop from 8.2% to 7% might sound kind of small on paper, but in a nation this size, that represents millions of young students, especially young girls, who are staying in school, transitioning from middle to secondary school, and actually completing their education.
So, what's actually keeping these kids in the classroom? Honestly, it's about solving the basics. When nearly 99% of schools finally have dedicated girls' toilets, you instantly remove one of the primary historical reasons young girls were dropping out. Add in a massive surge in computer labs, reliable electricity backup, and a strong 54.9% representation of female educators, and you've created a genuinely supportive modern ecosystem for learning. Finally, let's wrap up with Section 5, Measuring Service Sector Growth, and how we track the economy. Did you know that over half of the nation's entire GDP comes from services? 55% to be exact. The problem is, measuring all of that is incredibly tricky. When you buy a physical product, like, say, a pen, it's easy to count. But when we talk about IT, hospitality, local tutors, or healthcare, measuring that exact output gets wildly complex. And for a sector driving 55% of the economy, having precise data is absolutely vital for good policymaking. GST data is fantastic, right? It gives us real-time info on the big, formal, registered companies. But it totally misses the local real estate agent or the unregistered consultant dealing in cash. That's where the newly proposed Annual Survey of Incorporated Services Sector Enterprises, or ASSESE, comes in. By blending formal GST data with these new wide-net annual surveys, policymakers can finally capture the hidden, informal economy.
So, to fix this, we're getting a brand new metric, slated to launch on July 29th. The Index of Service Production, or ISP, will combine these datasets. For the very first time, we'll have a unified statistical tool, kind of like a thermometer, to accurately gauge if the service sector is running hot, cooling down, and where exactly the government needs to intervene to keep things growing.
So, as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. Which of these distinct pillars will be the ultimate catalyst for the nation's long-term success? Will it be the shift toward green energy and EVs, the remarkable health dividends of empowering women, or maybe the precise tracking of our booming service economy? They're all crucial moving parts of a massive machine. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive today, and as always, keep questioning the data behind the headlines.